Welcome back to the Color Scheme game. As you know by now, with each lesson you learn a lot more than just how to play the game. So today, what I'm trying to do is give you as many different ways of drawing, as many different approaches to building up to using color as I possibly can. And I know that everyone learns differently. So even though I may be contradicting myself at times, I'm trying to reach everyone that I possibly can, and explain things in a way that's understood by people on many different levels. So today I'm going to show you a different tool, and this is a dip pen, okay, just a nib that goes in a holder. And I like this one. There are a lot of different kinds of holes that are available, cut in, and they have different flexibility. And I'm going to use ink. Now this ink is an old school desk inkwell, American Seating Company, number 60. And I like this one because it has a little cap that keeps the ink a little bit longer than just an open inkwell would. And in this inkwell is a combination of different ink, so I can't really tell you what it is. When I clean out my pens, I will often empty what's in them into this ink. And I don't put this into a fountain pen because there's sediment and particles and all kinds of things I wouldn't want to put into a fountain pen. But it's perfect for dipping. It's perfect for brushing. So, I love insects. Now, I know many of you probably don't, but I find them incredibly inspiring. I mean, look at all those different shapes. And the shadows are great. I'm not quite sure where I found this one. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to do this realistically. I'm going to take shapes and work around them, and then I will draw the cell afterwards because I like things to be outside of the cells. So it may not look like the insect at all when I'm done, but I'm just going to take one little segment at a time, and this is a variation from doing a tight closed contour, and you can always close up shapes in order to put your pigments in and your colors. Okay, so dip in and let's see what happens.
Wag that tail, shake it, baby. Nose to the trail, you're just a dog, just a dog. You've been howling at the moon from the witching house that morning paper come. Puppy, follow me home. Begging, baby, want that bone. Just a dog, just a dog. You've been howling at the moon from the witching house that morning paper come. You say now, woo, 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 well, woo, 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 woo. You say now, woo, 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 well, woo, 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 woo. You've been howling at the moon.
Okay, now I got all of these shapes just from these shapes. So now I'm going to look more at this than I am at that. And I'm going to see what I can do just inspired by what I learned. I'm not going to look at the bug anymore.
From the witching out to that morning paper comes. You say now, ooh, 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 well, ooh, 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 ooh.
I photographed the drawing and formatted it so that it could be a PDF file for you. This is the copy that I printed out on watercolor paper. The first thing that I want to do is I want to check to make sure that I have closed shapes. So I'm going to go carefully around this and with permanent ink because I don't want it to bleed. Since I printed this out in a printer, it won't bleed. So I don't want just what I'm adding to bleed. So you can use a fine tip permanent marker or permanent ink pen. And something like this, I'm going to add a shape because I'm thinking I may kind of like that to be a little bit different. I wanted to make sure that this kind of crazy drawing would work as a closed shape drawing for you to work with. And after photographing it so that I could print it up as a line drawing, I worked into it with some value washes just to see if, in terms of it being black and white, it would work well. And this video will show you how that worked out. And then we'll move right into the color. The color scheme will be number 5, analogous with 1 complement. Now let's find out what color we will include in the color scheme. A 3, so we have to include green in the color scheme. So here is our color scheme number 5, analogous with 1 complement. And I have to include green. So I have this, which I'm not too crazy about because it looks really close in value. See, look, I'm dealing all with these. Red violet is probably not quite as dark there, so I doubt that I'm going to pick that one. Okay, so starting here, I could pick this one, which doesn't look bad. I've got red violet, and I have yellow, yellow, green, and green, which gives me a pretty good range. I'm moving over this way, and it's getting into territory that I'm not crazy about. I am not a huge fan of red and green because they're so similar in value. So it looks like I'm losing part of my value range. I've lost my yellow and I've come back up in the red, so I'm really only in this range for color value. I'm not crazy about that. Okay, this is a little bit more interesting. I've got blue, blue-green to here, and then red-orange. It still is too much in the middle of the value range for me. And it looks like I can't go any further because then I don't have green. So this is the one I'm going to pick. Why? Because after playing this for 3 years, every day, I discovered that when I'm stuck with middle range value, it doesn't work very well. The colors can be beautiful, but I lose my design, which means I lose my composition. And so certainly try it. Go ahead, be my guest. You could make the yellow-green almost as light as the yellow. Remember in the sample earlier of the tangerines, it was very pale, so that's a possibility. But red can only go so dark. If your red is an alizarin crimson, then you might be able to pull it off pretty well. So really, try it, experiment. You're going to learn by doing it yourself. But for the demo, I'm going to use red, violet, green, green, and yellow. Here is my palette for painting in the abstract insect. Now I used these two to mix the red violet, and I used the blue to mix the green and the yellow green, but I'm not using these when I paint. The ones you see now are the only ones that I'll be using. Red violet, yellow, and I'm only using the cool yellow that I've chosen, even though it shows two here. That's just for reference. You're only using one yellow, green, and green. So this is the palette that I'll use to paint the line drawing. The reason that I'm not using the tins is that I have to make sure to mix enough paint because it's going to be very hard to match this exactly. So even though I have to stir it up in case the pigment separates, I have enough to paint that small drawing. This has a lot of very small areas, and even though I can get into small areas with this, it's going to be very frustrating, and I'm just not in the mood to be that frustrated. So I am going to go with my favorite travel brushes, which are the Da Vinci, and they're just divine, and they spring back, and they really work well. I will use this one when it comes to larger areas, and sometimes I use both. But yeah, you can move on to a smaller brush if you want, or you can stay with this one. It's up to you. And I am seeing right here, I've got this floating arm. So I'm going to fix that too because it looks like it's balancing on top of this. And I think because I have the analogous colors to play with, I'm going to do the bodies with the analogous, and I'll do the background with the dark so that I have a good contrast. That's where I'll begin. And I'll start with the bigger brush. You can see I'm pulling the puddle. Make sure you have a big enough puddle. And I have to keep going back and forth so that at this point, because it's split right here, I need to push two puddles at the same time. If you don't want to do that, then just make sure that you close off this gap. And the paper I'm using now is a much better paper. It's Arches. So I'm having far more fun moving it along. It feels great. The drag on the brush is just wonderful. I notice that I'm turning my paper because I like to keep moving my brush in the way that's most natural. I'm finished painting in the red violet for now. I've got a basis from which I can choose everything else. When you're working with an analogous color scheme, it's a little bit more flexible. There were some areas that I originally painted the lighter, the yellow-green, and I found that this shape was blending into this and I didn't like it. So I was able to put another, when this was dry, I was able to put another glaze of the green on top of it. And you'll see there are some variations where I've gone and I've lightened something up or darkened it, lightened it by adding a glaze of the yellow. I did that here, and then I made this darker, but it still is totally within that range of yellow to green. So feel free to play with that. The important thing is that you're making decisions and not that you're stuck because you're following the rules. If there's a really good reason for you to change the value of something, do it. That's what this is about. It's about learning how to make those choices and seeing what those choices do.